Maria from the Mirror. I've got a couple of questions for me. First one is about statutory sick pay. And Prime Minister, you made announcements, or Chancellor made announcements at the budget yesterday, which cover a lot of people, but there's still some gig workers and other low-paid workers that aren't going to be covered by it, and will therefore have to embark on the benefit system, enter the benefit system. Can you keep the door open to looking again at whether some of those workers might be covered by SSP, rather than forcing them onto universal credit, which is quite a difficult system to get their heads around? And secondly, can I quickly ask you whether you have any concerns yourself? You're coming into a lot of contact with a lot of people in small environments rather than mass gatherings. Whether you yourself have any concerns or worries, like a lot of people do, about getting coronavirus, and whether, as Prime Minister, you've got measures in place with your, I think it's your first Secretary of State, I believe it's Dominic Raab, to step in should you be incapacitated for any length of time. Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, on the issue, you're quite right, Pippa. It's very important that we do everything we can to protect people who are not necessarily eligible for SSP, statutory sick pay. You saw what we did by advancing statutory sick pay. We're laying instruments today that will help people who are unemployed or not in work, who are self-employed, on benefits. And the crucial thing is that we will do everything that is necessary to make sure that when we ask people to do something tough, as Chris has just been saying, something difficult, like staying at home and protecting other people, that you're not disadvantaged. No one is penalised for doing the right thing. And on the second thing, well, I'm washing my hands. That's the crucial thing. And Mesa, Hall of the Express, Mesa.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mesa Hall from the Daily Express. Lots of people, Prime Minister, will be keen to do their bit and help out, whether it's helping out overstretched NHS or public services or helping protect the vulnerable. Are you planning any form of register or anything in advance so that people with the right skills can do the right job for the country in its hour of need?
Indeed, Mesa, we are, and I know that Matt Hancock has set up a system so that people, for instance, wanting to come back into the NHS, people who have skills that could be of value to the country now, will have a way of doing that and of contributing. We certainly encourage people to think of doing that in the weeks ahead. Jason Groves, Daily Mail.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to follow up Mesa's point, you asked for people to mobilise to support each other through this crisis. I wonder what sort of things you had in mind. And Sir Patrick, can I just pick you up on a point you made? You said we were roughly 4 weeks behind Italy. Should people be looking at what's going on in Italy and thinking, Christ, that's what we're going to be facing in a month?
Thanks, Jason. Well, look, on what people should be doing, I think that's a really very important question, because in asking people to stay at home and look after themselves, clearly that's putting a burden and a necessity upon others, potentially to help them, to bring them food and support. So perhaps I'll ask Patrick and Chris to elaborate on this point, but we will certainly be hoping that people will think of their neighbours, think if they are aware that people are staying at home to protect the community from the spread of the virus. Let's think what we can do to help them. Don't forget that, I think the correct advice is not to go within 2 metres, but it should be possible to help people.
I think that's right, and I think all the behavioural science says that the biggest effect during times like this is not outbreaks of panic, it's actually outbreaks of altruism, of people wanting to help each other, and whether that's sort of delivering things to neighbours, whether it's making sure that people have got their medicines, and that, I think, is the effect that we'd expect, particularly in the UK. In answer to the questions about Italy, on the curve, we're maybe 4 weeks or so behind in terms of the scale of the outbreak. And we're behind where Germany and France are as well in terms of the scale of the outbreak. And you'd expect it to follow a similar trajectory in terms of the numbers, not in terms of the response. And that's why the measures we're putting into place come into place today, to see whether we can deflect that and get that into a different trajectory. But that's the unmitigated curve would follow exactly that curve in terms of numbers, but of course that's different from saying in terms of the actions that have been taken.
Thanks very much. Laura, thank you.
You've made it very clear that the sort of loud and clear message to the elderly is at the moment don't stay home because pensioners they won't be able to stick it for sort of weeks and months on end. It's something you can only ask of people for a finite period. Is it possible to talk a bit about what the working assumptions are for when that period kicks in and how long old people might be expected to try to stay home as much as possible? And how old is old?
I'll put that straight to the scientific advisor and maybe to Chris.
Yes.
As well.
So we think that the peak may be something like 10 to 14 weeks away. It could be a bit longer. And you would want to try to make sure that the elderly are protected during the peak area. About 95% of people would be predicted to get the infection over a 9-week or 10-week period either side of the peak. And about 50% would be infected about 3 or 4 weeks either side of the peak on the current evidence of how the epidemic looks. It may change as we put the measures in place. So that means that even to cover the peak, you're talking about trying to make sure that those sorts of measures are in place for 13, 14 weeks or so.
Thank you.
Shall I
Sorry,
just add
Chris,
one more
yes.
thing on that, which is obviously what we're giving is national recommendations. Individual people may have discussions with their own GP or specialist if they're under specialist care that said that this is something which is appropriate for them, even now. But what we will be doing is giving very clear and hopefully relatively detailed guidance for people when we get to the point we think across the country as a whole, this seems a sensible thing to do.
Thank you. Last question, Elizabeth Piper.
Hello, Prime Minister Liz Piper from Reuters. I was just wondering if I could pose this question to all of you, really. I mean, how confident are we of the data, the international data, and how can we really know whether we understand the behaviour of this illness when we not necessarily have a chance to verify that data? And how does that affect how we plan to deal with this crisis?
Well, I'm going to. My impression is that there are some countries which are having some success in greatly reducing the incidence of the disease, and whatever whether those statistics are entirely trustworthy or not, the tendency is pretty clear. I think the issue is the one that was referred to earlier, which is that there may be measures that we could take which were of a very draconian and immediate nature that really did suppress drastically the contact between human beings in this country, but might mean that the delay, the disease simply came back, surged back again in a few months or in a few months' time in a way that we weren't properly protected for. But yes.
I think that there are certain things we are very confident of, like the mortality rates, which we now, initially we were uncertain of. There are also things we do not know, and the most important of those is how many people get this infection without any symptoms. And the reason we don't know that is we do not have a test that can tell us that. And depending on the answer to that question, this pandemic looks very different. So there's a kind of things we definitely know, things we don't know at all, like that, and some things between where we've got a reasonably good estimate based on data from elsewhere, but it's improving all the time. And one of the reasons why delay helps us, it's not the main reason, is that our understanding of this virus improves week on week, and we're narrowing down on what we know about it.
That's exactly what I would have said.
Right. Well, so I think we're going to wrap it up, because I think that's more or less all we have to tell you at this stage. It's a pretty important development in our planning for beating back this disease. And I hope everybody's understood, everybody's clear about what we're saying. If you have those two symptoms, or if you have one or other of those two symptoms of potential coronavirus, a high temperature and a new and continuous cough, then you should stay at home. And the reasons that we advise you to do that is really that this will help us to delay and flatten the peaks, squash that sombrero that you saw on the map, because that is the way to minimise the suffering and minimise the impact of this disease. We will, in the course of the next few weeks be bringing forward more measures to delay the impact of the disease as we move through the delay phase. Anyway, that's all for now. Don't forget, wash your hands, and we will get through this. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
You're watching a BBC News